Discovering Alabama is a production of the Alabama Museum of Natural History.
We usually think of a river as the ribbon of water that flows between the riverbanks. It is that, and yet it's much more than that. The stream in the river channel is the accumulation of water that has passed over and through the many features of the surrounding landscape, the woods, the meadows, the mountain slopes, and the deep forest glens. In fact, a river's boundaries stretch far beyond the banks to include all the land drained by the river. The watershed. This watershed is the biological and ecological system that defines the river. I'm Doug Phillips. These are the headwaters of the Cahaba River, up here in northern Jefferson and neighboring St. Clair counties. From here down to where the river ends, near Selma, the Cahaba is only about 120 miles long, but its natural diversity makes it one of the most significant rivers in the nation. And the changes occurring in its watershed may make it one of the most endangered. Join me for a look at this important river, why it may be threatened, and what we can do to protect it and our other water resources for the future.
This program is about a land unknown to many people. A land that in many ways has escaped the hustle and bustle of modern civilization. A place with bountiful backcountry, forests, streams, and wildlife more diverse than can be found in much of the inhabited world. Come along with me as we explore the natural wonders of this land. Come along as we discover Alabama.
Welcome to Discovering Alabama. As we float the Cahaba, we can see how a river and its watershed are inseparable. And we can see how our growing human population is bringing rapid change to the watershed and to the river. What's happening to the Cahaba is happening to other rivers. And by looking at the Cahaba, we can see many of the water quality problems affecting resources across the state, the region, and the nation. Water is so much a part of our lives that too often we take this precious resource for granted. Most of the time, we're not really conscious of it until we turn on the tap to fill our glass, to wash, or to water the lawn, or take a trip down a quiet river. But it is water that makes our planet unique. Earth is the only place we know where water is plentiful, and the only place we know that supports life. According to scientists, life originated in water, and though life on Earth has evolved and proliferated over millions of years, the water that's here today is the same water that was here when life began. Every one of the Earth's changing plants and animals, from the smallest mold spore to the largest dinosaur, has consumed and respired this water. And from seas, lakes, and rivers, it has evaporated, condensed, and rained down upon the Earth over and over and over again for eons. Today it's a creature called Homo sapiens who seems to have the greatest thirst for water. The name Homo sapiens means wise man, but how we treat this one element that makes our world unique, the element that enables life, may well determine whether we're wise enough to live up to our name. As the presence of water makes planet Earth unique in our solar system, Alabama's unending variety of rivers and water resources make it unique in the nation. From Alabama's rocky highlands in the north to the lazy meander of its coastal plain, the state itself is a vast watershed of unrivaled diversity. Over 40,000 miles of creeks and rivers flow through Alabama, each stream defined and nurtured by the landscape around it. And right in the heart of this remarkable system courses the Cahaba River. The Cahaba flows through an unusual variety of physiographic regions. You'll find its origins in the steep hill country above Birmingham, among the southern reaches of the Appalachian Highlands. Here, many small streams drain southward and combine to form the Cahaba proper. As the river begins to flow south of Birmingham, it curves into the broadening valley that bears its name, the Cahaba Valley. Just north of Centerville, the river makes one last tumble and heads out toward the pastoral prairie country of the coastal plain, where it carves elegant oxbow turns and sculpts splendid sand and gravel bars. The actual winding length of the Cahaba is more than 180 stream miles. This means it's the longest free-flowing river in the state. That, combined with the diversity of regions it crosses, makes the river host to a wide variety of flora and fauna, including more fish species per mile than any other river in North America. The 1,800 square miles of land in the Cahaba's watershed support a river system that ranks biologically as one of the richest in the nation. The natural qualities of the Cahaba were a big attraction for Alabama's early inhabitants. Native Americans shared the river's bounty and used the Cahaba as an official borderline between the Creek Nation to the north and east and the Choctaw to the west and south. Today, almost 60% of Alabama's population lives within 100 miles of the Cahaba River. That's about 2 million people, and most live within the Cahaba watershed. So this special river, once a tribal dividing line, is now a divided resource. Pressured by the encroachment of a growing population, the river is a resource in demand and under stress as never before.
Today, the biggest problem, or for the long term, the biggest problem is going to be control of non-point sources of pollution. Point sources, the pipes from sewage treatment plants and big industries, were the things that were focused on first when the Clean Water Act began to kick in a little over 20 years ago. A lot of those programs have begun to work. There's a lot of work still to be done. But as those sources have begun to be controlled, it's become very apparent to everyone who watches these things that in and of itself that won't be enough, particularly for rivers like the Cahaba, where there is so much non-point source pollution, runoff from streets and parking lots and construction sites, farming areas, mining areas, and a host of other things. All of these must be controlled much better if this river is going to live.
First, let me define what a watershed is. A watershed is simply an area that drains to a common source. So everyone lives within a watershed. And water, being the universal solvent, essentially summarizes those activities on the watershed. And what we find downstream is essentially reflects what's going on upstream.
It's a simple problem, really. As more and more people inhabit the watershed, more and more of what they do impacts the watershed. More and more of what they leave behind finds its way into the river. A simple problem, but no simple solution. People move to the area because it's beautiful, but the more people, the more development to support them, and the more problem it makes for the river. We come back to that idea that a river is more than just the water that flows between the banks. A river is the accumulation of water that's passed over and through all the features in the surrounding landscape within the river's drainage area. There is a direct relationship between the condition of the stream and the condition of the watershed. And many of the water quality problems can be traced to the changes we've made in the watershed. "200 years ago, we could have beached our boat here and gone up and explored miles of wild woodlands. No more wild woodlands, no more trees, no more grass, no more topsoil. It's true that people want shopping areas as well as rivers and woodlands. So in the minds of many, it's a trade-off. But we need to be sure that it's a fair trade, not only for today, but for tomorrow as well. Before this was graded, compacted, and paved, water soaked into the ground. Not anymore. The water runs off the pavement, into the drainage system, and into the river. In a hard rain, the river can flood, back up sewage treatment plants, and even spill raw sewage. They call water the universal solvent because so many substances are water soluble, and so many substances can be carried and moved by water. When it rains on roads and parking lots, lawns, golf courses, and new construction sites, the water carries oil, chemicals, bacterial waste, trash, and eroding soil, whatever's in the watershed, right down to the river. But in spite of the problems that come with encroaching urban development, there are sections of the Cahaba that inspire us with their beauty and remind us of all that nature can be. South of Birmingham and well out of reach of the city, the Cahaba flows through a landscape that is still predominantly rural. In Bibb County, the river crosses a series of broad shoals where each year at springtime, the Cahaba lily comes into bloom. Here flourishes the last large population of the lily. Its habitat has declined severely in the last 20 years, and today this beautiful Alabama flower is an endangered species. We're far away from the city, and there's no shortage of trees and grass. But even here we find that the Cahaba's watershed isn't really a natural environment. In fact, fish like the Cahaba shiner and plants like the Cahaba lily have become endangered in part because of this: erosion and siltation. If the land in a watershed is stripped of vegetation or turned up and loosened, the soil washes down into the stream. Here it settles at the bottom of the stream bed, where it smothers the life out of the plants and animals that live and reproduce there, the animals that are at the base of the food chain. This siltation here has worked its way down from the site of an old abandoned surface mine. You can see we left the soil and bits of coal exposed. It's in pretty rough condition. Rainwater has continued to wash tons of soil down to the river, choking the bottom with sediment. Today, stronger laws require greater use of sediment barriers during the mining and better reclamation of the land afterward. But even today's improved mining practices are still a disturbance to the watershed, requiring careful environmental control. Standing, undisturbed forests are probably the best protector of watersheds. Percolating through the forest floor, rainwater and runoff are filtered and purified on their way to the stream. And the forest soil, held in place by vegetation, acts like a sponge. It soaks up water in wet weather, so the stream is less likely to flood, and releases it in dry weather, so the stream doesn't run dry. So timbering, like mining, can affect the watershed and have an impact on stream quality. Leaving plenty of wooded streamside buffer is an easy way to reduce this impact. Alabama is blessed with an abundance of natural resources, like coal and timber, and we all benefit from their use. But if we're wise, if we live up to the name Homo sapiens, we'll recognize that it's a matter of balance. We should not profit from one resource at the expense of another, at the expense of our rivers and streams. Rich farmland is another natural blessing that Alabama enjoys. Where the Cahaba flows through the rural Black Belt, we're about as far away from the freeways and the shopping centers as you can get. But ironically, the river faces some of the same problems with runoff that it does in the urban areas.
Well, you know, there are a lot of folks upstream in the Birmingham area that are quite concerned about our river, and I say our river because we're landowners adjacent to it, and we have a vested interest. And naturally, we're as concerned or more so than they are about its overall condition.
Down here, there isn't much in the way of parking lots, but the land's been cleared and cultivated. And just like the urban setting, unless we're very careful, the runoff can carry all sorts of things into the river. Here it's pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, and sometimes animal waste. Pesticides and herbicides can contribute to chemical pollution. Animal waste is a bacterial problem. And fertilizer runoff can raise the nutrient level in the stream, causing algae blooms, which deplete oxygen from the water and choke out other forms of life.
I would say that the bioassessment and water quality characteristics would classify the Cahaba not as excellent, but certainly good. And that's much better than many of the streams that we've sampled recently in the state of Alabama. That certainly that represents an opportunity to maintain the conditions that we have out here, and more importantly, try to improve them.
Well, in my opinion, the entire length of the Cahaba River has been affected. Here in the north half of the river, we have real severe problems with erosion, and with large rainstorms, we flush sewage, raw sewage, out of the collection system into the river, and that creates serious problems with nutrification and health problems and other things further down. And in the bottom half of the river, the result has been large swings in dissolved oxygen, and of course oxygen is real important to these creatures. The cumulative effect has been that 30 to 40% of some of the fish populations have seen declines, and in some cases those are species that are found only in the Cahaba River.
One of the more important ways of understanding the condition of the river is to look at the invertebrate populations, such as the snails and the clams and the aquatic insects that live here. And it's been shown over about a 50-year period there's been a dramatic decline in some of those organisms. In spite of those problems, the river is still very important because it's one of the last free-flowing rivers that we find in Alabama. And for that reason, it's very important to us and worth protecting. We need to take care that we protect it and conserve the resource.
We're protecting one of the last environments of its kind in Alabama. Well, we've seen some examples of non-point source pollution along the Cahaba, and we know that the river has declined, and that the long-term effects of harmful changes in the watershed can be serious. So, where do we go from here? What does the future hold for the Cahaba? Alabama will experience its share of population increase in the years ahead, and the Cahaba watershed is sure to remain an attractive growth area. Meanwhile, water and water quality are among the most pressing environmental issues of our time. And for the Cahaba, like so many rivers across America, the question is, will we have the foresight to protect this vital resource?
Unless we study the world around us and understand it and make a plan for growth, we have no idea what we might lose, and we might find ourselves losing a lot more than we gain with that development and growth. Now, I've heard all of my life, I've heard people say that such planning costs too much, But my personal experience with it is that you can make more money with a plan of the kind I'm talking about than going about it without such planning. There is a Cahaba River Watershed plan which guides development and ensures that the river doesn't become a victim of happenstance.
The Cahaba Watershed Plan considers where growth might occur in the watershed and proposes erosion controls, natural buffer zones, greenways, and other options to guide development and reduce environmental damage. The plan was initiated by local citizens and has received support from many local governments. To be fully successful, it will require the cooperation of every local government in the watershed. Ultimately, such careful planning is needed for all our rivers, and a number of efforts are underway across Alabama to encourage this.
In addition to the watershed management plan to protect the Cahaba River, there's several others around Alabama. There's the Flint Creek and the Bear Creek in the northern part of the state, the Choctawhatchee and Pea River management plan in the south, and also down at the Mobile Bay, the Baywatch program. And one of the newer programs in our state that is citizen-based watershed management is the Alabama Water Watch, where citizens, teachers, and people of all ages and walks of life can get involved and get trained and equipped to monitor the water quality and help protect the water.
We address the lack of an environmental ethic by providing teacher workshops and working directly with students on the stream bank, talking about these things, talking about water quality, talking about watershed management, talking about best management practices that address urban development as well as agriculture and forestry pursuits.
Our journey down the Cahaba comes to an end in Dallas County. Here, the Cahaba's waters join the Alabama River and flow on down to the Tensas Delta and Mobile Bay. There, they merge with the streams of many other watersheds from across the state.
I look forward to the day when we in Alabama embrace the fact that we can have wonderful economic growth and preserve our natural heritage at the same time, that they actually complement each other. For that to happen, each one of us must have the courage to stand up for that natural heritage, and that courage must be shown by our business and political leaders as well.
In a way, the Cahaba River has been a family friend for generations. My dad can sure tell you that it's changed a lot over the years. Right now, our friend, the Cahaba River, is in a lot of trouble.
The longer I live, the more aware I become that we do not own these resources that are around us, that we are given by God the privileges of using them while we're alive, and stewardship demands that we pass them on to future generations better than we found them.
For all the centuries we human beings have been on this earth, water has sustained us. We built our cities beside the rivers, nourished our crops from the streams. Water has empowered us, cleansed us, and even anointed us in baptism. But for a surprisingly small bit of dust, we human beings are made of water. We and the river are joined by this element.
For all the centuries we've been on this earth, water has nurtured us. But today we must understand that this ancient relationship may be changing. And to care for our water resources, we must see them as part of a larger whole. What happens in the city, in the forest, or on the farm affects this miraculous liquid upon which we all depend. And throughout Alabama's history, her people have depended upon a remarkable system of streams and rivers, a network of watersheds that combine into one grand system, one magnificent watershed unrivaled anywhere in the nation. A long time ago,
the Indians who lived by the Cahaba felt a special kinship. As they might have put it, the river is our brother. Now, perhaps we must take greater care to be our brother's keeper. Thanks for joining us. Please send any questions or comments to this address.
This program is supported by grants from Legacy, Partners in Environmental Education, the Alabama Forest Resources Center, promoting education and cooperation for all the benefits of proper forest management, the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, State Lands Division, and the Alabama Wildlife Federation, working for wildlife since 1935.